space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilization, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Greetings, salutations, and welcome to Retrek. I'm Captain Jim, and with me, of course, is Admiral Elliot.
Hi there.
And this time we're here to talk about, we've got another hologrammy themed episode, and then we're starting something new, which we're quite excited about. So we're finally going to look at the Dominion War. So we did quite a big series last time looking at the Temporal Cold War, but this one's a really big one to take on, as I know, because I put together a list earlier today. And
yeah, I think it's going to take, well, we'll probably be doing this in about 2 years' time, coming to an end on it.
Yeah, I would think so. It's probably about...
When we're looking at, we've had Discovery and Strange New Worlds and Picard breaking up things.
Yeah, we've got us work cut out, but I think it was always going to be the case that unless we did it this way, we were hardly ever going to touch on DS9. Because we've done one or two here and there, but most of the meat of DS9 is somehow tied into this arc, and
yeah,
it's really difficult to just pick one out and focus on it without the context. So
yeah, it's worth, like, we're probably doing the definitive Dominion War digging to.
Yeah, we've been very, very thorough with it, as you'll find out in the second half of this episode when we're looking at an episode that, to be fair, has nothing to do with the Dominion War whatsoever, at least not officially, but we'll talk about why we're doing it when we get there.
Yeah.
Before that, though, really quick bit of Trek news, because we don't know anything other than the fact that they've announced that a new film will be coming out in 2023. But that's it.
Yeah, they've said it's Star Trek in the Star Trek universe, haven't they?
Yeah. So that
I'm wondering, because we heard that they're not going to do Section 31 till one of the other live shows comes to an end.
Yeah.
So I think it's either Discovery's going to end after season 5, or Picard will just run for its 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And then one of them will be based on the movie.
Ooh, that'd be interesting. Maybe a final next gen film. Yeah, sort of a tie-in to finish off Picard. I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, a bit like if they can do it as much justice as The Undiscovered Country did for the original cast as their sort of final mission.
Yeah, Next Gen never got the send-off it deserved, really. So, yeah, that'd be really interesting. Or even if it's something completely new, I'm happy with it. It's nice if the film in development. I really like the idea that now that everything's under one roof and they're expanding out the Star Trek universe, that you can start to do stuff like the Marvel movies and TV shows do and have that interconnectivity now. So this could be really, really exciting. I mean, you could even do something crazy, have it like like the Avengers team up of the Star Trek universe, All you need is either Q getting involved or a temporal anomaly or something like that. And there's no reason you could. I don't think they would do this for the first film of this new batch, but there's nothing to stop you having Picard and Michael Burnham and Captain Pike and just shove together in the film.
I read an article this week, and there's speculation going that Strange New Worlds is going to be shown before Picard, and in one of the episodes of Strange New Worlds is going to be a Q episode that's going to link into Picard later.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That they're going to be linked. That there's going to be a tie-in between the two.
If you want to do it, if you want to have a thread through all the different shows, Q is the most obvious one to do. because he can pop up in any of them, and they could have some sort of arc built, and you could have it spin off into films. It's crazy. It's so good though that, like, you know, back when we started this podcast, Discovery hadn't even started airing yet, and we're here like 2 years later or whatever, and we've got more Star Trek shows than we can shake a stick at, and we're talking about movies, connecting different shows. It's brilliant. Anyway, so from Voyager, then we're looking at Living Witness this week, which. We'll be honest, we'll put our cards on the table. The reason we decided on this episode, we were talking about how Janeway could be a hologram in Prodigy. And we could both remember this episode, having the Doctor, and he'd been around for ages, and it was a backup version of it, but we couldn't really remember what the ins and outs of the whole story were. So we thought we'd take a punt and see if this might be a way of potentially explaining Janeway. Spoilers, I don't think it is, but it's still a hologram episode to look at.
Yeah, it's actually a very good hologram episode.
Yeah, it's great. I think, this is a really, really good episode. So it starts off with basically evil Janeway, and you'd be forgiven for thinking, oh, Voyager's doing the mirror universe finally, when we, just from the cold open of this episode, she's got a very much more militaristic looking, not beating around the bush, a much more fascist looking version of the uniform. And there's
and her hair's different.
Yeah. So, and she's hamming it up a little bit. She does a good job, Kate Mulgrew, in this one. And basically we're finding out we're seeing a different version of Voyager, and there's little bits like they've got a Kazon officer knocking about on the bridge, and two Voxiers are so much pointier than they usually are, like the serious goblin ear, like Yoda or something going on. And there's all this thing of I forget the names of the races, but the alien wants Janeway to help them wipe out this enemy, or to give them assistance against this enemy. And Janeway takes it like to the extreme. She's like, no, well, we could fire on them, but we could use biological weapons. Let's go all out on it. And you've got the Doctor there, and I just noticed he had weird eyes, but we find out later in the episode it's because they think the Doctor's an android rather than a hologram. It's this crazy sort of militaristic version of Voyager. It's almost like
Voyager itself has been on steroids.
Yeah. The Voyager with all the extra.
Yeah, we've got a picture of the Voyager.
Yeah, let me bring that up. So, it is an interesting one. It's a good start, and I remember this version of Voyager because this is one that they sold us in the Eagle Moss collection. It's like, you can pay the same model. And
Warship Voyager, and someone's just stuck a load of big cannons on it.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what they've done. As we find out, it's because they've got it wrong and everything. But Voyager is not a warship. It'd look more like the Defiant if it was actually a warship. But anyway. We then, the other shoe drops pretty quickly. They don't string us along with what's going on and everything. We find out that it's basically a holographic recreation in a museum 700 years in the future, which actually, that'd put this more or less at the same time as Discovery, wouldn't it?
No, it's...
No?
It'd be a bit earlier.
A little bit earlier,
But it does crop up where it will actually fall into Discovery.
It'd be just before the burn or something. Anyway.
This would be about the late 29th century. Yeah.
So it's this history lesson, and you get these quite cool bits, like where you've got the student asking questions about it. And they're like, oh, how many people did they have? Oh, they had 400 soldiers. And they make the point of saying soldiers rather than crew.
Yeah, and
Obviously,
they had the assimilated Borg and Kazon.
because that's it. Like
they assimilated everyone on the way through.
Yeah, Voyager's been going around kidnapping people and making them join their fight kind of thing.
Like, I know that this species has got it wrong, and we all know they've got it wrong. But when you look at how much Voyager interfered in the Delta Quadrant on its way home, there must be stories like this as quite a regular event that species have myths built up around them and false misconceptions of what they are.
Definitely. I mean, this has been explored a little bit in Star Trek in other ways. That, like, the original series, we got loads of stories where the society had developed because of interference from the Federation earlier on, whether it was the gangster one or the Nazi one or the American Civil War one, or they went to that well a few times in TOS.
Yeah.
And like you said, there'd be all sorts of stories about Voyager. Like, it could almost be, on some planets, you can imagine it almost being like a Santa Claus thing, like, go to sleep because Voyager will bring you presents. Or an other planet.
or almost godlike.
Yeah.
So like how you have all the ancient alien people on the History Channel, because obviously it's real history, so that's why the History Channel broadcasts it all the time.
It's run out of real history now.
But you can imagine that there'd be a lot of planets that would have people talking like that about them.
Yeah, you would think
The benevolent aliens, there were gods from the sky,
or other versions like this, or versions where Voyager's the bogeyman, like, you will go to bed, otherwise Voyager will come and get you, Captain Janeway will shoot you or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and then we get the version of Harry, Kim, and Chakotay. And Chakotay is like preempting Hugh with this. He's got the tattoo all over his face in this.
Yeah.
It was obviously something they were trying out with Robert Beltran. Like, every now and again, we'll see what you can do with a full face tattoo.
Well, in a way, everyone's styled up as an extreme caricature of themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Except for, as we discover later, Paris, who's actually, you couldn't dial him up anymore.
Yes, the Doctor's just... And the Doctor himself in this version, he's like, well, I've got this hypo spray that can dissolve his optic nerves if we need him to stop. Like, all right, calm down, son. And the idea of Seven of Nine, like, she's sort of like a Borg hit squad that she's got, basically.
Yeah.
She's just a weapon on the ship. It's like, right, we've got problems. Get Seven out there with a Borg crew and they can do the dirty work. And then, you can assimilate a few more people now, so you can carry on doing that. And it even extends to things like, and I think this is a really great little detail, like the way they say Chakotay, they don't have that O sound, they sort of go Chakotay, and it makes it sound more aggressive. It's much more clipped and much more rough sounding, like hitting the K sounds really abrasively. So I think that's a wonderful little detail, and they've obviously told everyone to do it. It ultimately ends up then Janeway executes the guys, one of the species, and
the leader of the species that are telling the story,
and that's what gets us to this version in the future. And you go back to the museum, they've got a torpedo, and there's quite a good bit where he's like, well, don't touch that. And he's kidding, but he does say, like, that could destroy X number of city blocks or whatever.
Yeah, and was it 7 million people were killed?
Something like that, yeah. And you do get a bit where someone from the other species, and this develops the theme of the episode, really, is they start to question whether the history's accurate. Like, how do we know this is exactly what happened? And the curator of the museum says, well, we found this active thing now. We found this active log, which obviously turns out to be the Doctor.
Well, yeah, we found this device, and it's sort of like this got me thinking, like, this is 700 years in the future, and they've obviously got certain things, and this has remained hidden all that time and powered up.
Yeah, it is a bit odd. And, like, why is it taking them 700 years to find it, and how did it get there? Because we see the true version of events later on, and I can't really see any point during that story where this would have ended up. I don't know.
It's sort of brushed off, innit? It's sort of like, well, he must have stole it.
And yeah, it's fine. We need it to get the story going. But it's interesting what he says at this point, because he says, well, if this does disprove this version of events, we will believe it. We will have to believe it. And ultimately, he's proved to be right, because he does accept it. But it raises an interesting question there of, well, do people believe new proof when it comes to light? And I think that's very kind of pertinent for the times we're living in now. I think this episode resonates even more now than it did when it came out, because we have, the phrase fake news didn't exist when this episode came on, and alternative facts and all of this and revisionist history is something that is going on to a huge extent, particularly online. And I think over the last year during the pandemic, it's spread even more because, we've not had much to do apart from watch stuff on YouTube and, watch stuff on the internet. We wouldn't be broadcasting like this probably if there hadn't been a pandemic. So I think the episode was good for its time, but I think it's even more interesting now with these ideas particularly. So, the data contains the Doctor then. And the first thing the guy says is, whoa, you're not an android? Hey, what's going on? And the Doctor, as you would expect from the Doctor, is really not happy about it. He's not happy about it.
How did I get here? And
and
why are you saying this about us? That's not true.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He starts off, his thing is, well, you've got it wrong, and I've got to disprove it. But they're going to try him for war crimes, and it's really interesting. Like, so you're going to try this guy who was an artificial life form that you believe to be an android, but he's actually a hologram. But you're going to try him for war crimes that happened 700 years ago. That in and of itself is an interesting idea. And I like how they have little bits, like when he says, we were heading home, and he says, to Mars. And he's like, you couldn't even get that right. But then, again, it makes you wonder.
That makes me wonder how they got the name Mars, because, I wonder, have they managed to scan all of Voyager's database or something?
Yeah, and then if they have scanned all the database, why did they get it so wrong? But maybe it's something to do with if Voyager was built at Utopia Planitia, so they might have worked it out as well. Voyager originated from Mars, so they probably originated from Mars. I don't know. I mean, it's silly anyway, really, that they always talk about getting home to Earth when you've got loads of different species on the ship. But I suppose the Earth is... Yeah,
Earth is sort of like the centre of the Federation, isn't it?
Yeah. So, it is. Yeah, it does make you wonder where they got Mars from. So Doctor watches this other recreation, and that's like you say, where he sort of says, "Oh well, Paris is the same." And I don't think that's entirely fair, because Paris has never called Neelix a hedgehog in the real world.
But No, but they're all going on about chasing women and all that. And at this period, Paris was often chasing the women around. And the Doctor had seen a lot of this from the time that Kes was on board, because he was always in sickbay chasing Kes.
That's true.
The Doctor has very first-hand experience of actually Paris does act like this.
Yeah, he does.
And there has been name-calling between him and Neelix. Maybe not calling him a hedgehog, but there has been arguments between them. So, and the Doctor has witnessed them as well.
Yeah, and the Doctor don't have the highest opinion of Paris anyway, so...
well, he was meant to be his nurse, always absent.
Yeah, he preferred pets, though. So the Doctor sets the record straight, and basically it flips it. So the other species, the Kyrian, were actually the aggressors. And the Doctor flat out calls it at this point, like, this is revisionist history. And the curator does actually start to question it at this point, and you have his version of like a personal log, and he's like, well...
This is also... It also brings up an interesting point, does that? Because the Doctor's species, I can't remember the name, but they turned out to have been the aggressors, but they won the war.
Mm.
And they've rewritten the history that they were the victims of the other species. And it is often said that history is written by the victors.
Yes, no, I think that's exactly what we've got going on there. And they've done it, and they've sort of manipulated that to the extent that they've made this other species feel guilty about it, so that they feel subservient to them, and it's created this class system. And it is all built on this lie. But it's still interesting because neither of them's totally faultless. Like the version that we actually get of events, somebody innocent still gets killed, and know, it's not absolutely clean cut, which is, like a lazy...
all these millions of people did die.
Yeah, exactly. And a lazier version of the story would have had outright goodies and baddies, and it would have just flipped it over. But we don't get that. We get something much more interesting, much more nuanced than that. And the Doctor sort of offers, oh, well, I'll tweak the programme then and make it into the true story. And we get a replay of events. It doesn't sort of do it beat for beat, like an exact recreation, but you do get a couple of cool bits, like it starts with Janeway looking out the window in the ready room, but obviously it's totally different, and she's in the right uniform, and her hair's different, like you said. And we get it kind of played out again, and the ambassador guy's much more sort of humble in this version. He's like, I've got to warn you that, the Kyrians, we are with them, and there might be problems.
Well, you best stay keeping a distance.
But again, he's not played as an out-and-out goodie, because he does end up killing one of the Kyrian guys at the end of it. So it's interesting, because they've sort of justified this whole thing by saying, well, Voyager did it. Janeway killed the Kyrian. But the Kyrian was still killed without, it wasn't a case that in the true version he doesn't die, or in the true version it's an accident or anything. He is still killed. But I suppose the thing is that it shows much more that there were two sides to it, I suppose, rather than it just being much more one-sided. But yeah, I find that interesting that the ambassador guy's not totally innocent in the true version.
Yeah.
Even if he's not as much of a villain as they make him out in the fake version.
Yeah. It's like, it's that truth within the lie, isn't it? That they've put elements of the truth in there, but
And I find like the closing bits of it, I think, are really, really interesting, where you have the people attack the museum and trash the museum, and we're led to believe that this is because people have heard about the Doctor and people are questioning it much more. And it's said that, this is just a catalyst for it. Like, this sense has been building for a while, and there has been some unrest anyway. So it's not as simple as the Doctor.
It's not the cause, is it? It's sort of like,
and
it's sort of like another spark.
Yeah, like we get that going back to the beginning of the episode, the fact that you've got someone in the museum questioning whether this is real. So it's obviously, the idea is there that we need to be questioning our history and checking if it's actually what's happened. And what the Doctor says is really, really intriguing, because he says, well, look, I'll just delete my program because my presence is causing all of this problem. And it's better to let people believe the revisionist history, to let them believe what they've always believed. And I find that really, really interesting, because in a way, you can sort of see the argument to be made, like, is the truth more hurtful than the lie? Will the truth cause more problems if it comes out? And is it better to let people believe what, from that perspective, you could argue is a white lie or a good lie or whatever? And it sort of speaks to, like we were talking about earlier on, like the mythology, like the power of myth. We have all these, like, particularly like with us in English folklore, we have things like King Arthur and Robin Hood, and they didn't exist, or they didn't exist in that form. Well, but it's nice. It's nice to believe that they might have done, or to take it to another extreme, something like Santa Claus, which spoilers, but the idea of the myth of it and the belief in it can be a great thing. And I think it very briefly, they play with those ideas, but ultimately the Doctor decides, no, let's find this tricorder that proves it, and let's go ahead with it.
Yeah.
And then we get another twist, which is that all of this has been a recreation as well. And we find out that the Doctor paved the way for peace in this society.
And he went on to serve as the chief medical officer for both societies, and
then ultimately left to go and try and get back to the Alpha Quadrant and find his way home.
Yeah, they let him have a ship, which you have to assume that they have mobile holographic technology as well, to being able to do that for him, and for if he's been a chief medical officer for the society, you have to assume that it's not just in one place. He has to be able to get about.
Yeah, I would imagine so. So maybe they've
I imagine that they've given him something like the mobile emitter. And the interesting point is here that they say that he was chief medical officer for another 200 years, and then got homesick and wanted to head home. Now that puts him in line with Discovery.
Yeah. So how interesting!
So there's a chance that we could get the Doctor arriving home in Discovery.
Yeah, or Discovery could find him, because Discovery's got a spore drive. So the Doctor is out there, or this version of the Doctor is out there. But one last thing I wanted to bring up with this is, by the nature of the episode, we're being told to question these recreations. So I'm not convinced we can take what we see with the Doctor at face value either, because that too could be a revisionist take on history. I mean, what we know of the Doctor and his character, the likelihood is that it's true. He acts the way that he does. But I think just the nature of the episode invites us to question that and say, well, how do we know that this
even if is his final scene even accurate?
Yeah, is his final scene even accurate? And, if you want to take it much more sort of, to a meta level going further and further, it's like, okay, well, that might not be true, but the representation that video is showing of the previous society might not be true. So it could be propaganda saying, well, look, they tried to trick you by showing you all this stuff about Voyager, so we need to keep them as an underclass now because they tried to do that, and our hero, the Doctor, had to come and save us. And you could just end up with like Russian dolls, this species back and forth and back and forth.
Well, we don't actually know how far in the future the final lot are, because they're talking about events that happened 200 years after sort of like the main story takes place.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're talking about it as being well in the past.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I do think that's a real standout episode, that one. I was a big fan of that one.
It's one of those that you don't jump to straight away when you're looking for episodes to rewatch. No. But when you rewatch it, you sort of, that's bloody.
And the thing
that's
is,
really clever.
A lot of the time, and I'm guilty of it, probably more than most people, is like, you can dismiss Voyager of, it was just doing the same thing as TNG did, but it does now and again pull out one like this, where it's just, the concept is just brilliant, the execution's spot on. It's a really good picture.
And it's true of that is Voyager. There is a lot where they just do what we've seen before.
Yeah. But
to be fair, DS9 did it a lot in its first season.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of DS9's first season then, so this is our start of the Dominion War, and those of you listening, hearing me say first season, are probably thinking, what are you talking about? So, we're actually going for episode 4, I think, of Deep Space Now, 5, if you count episode 2. We're starting with Captive Pursuit, and this is because basically it's the first time we get a species from the Gamma Quadrant, but also these are so blatantly a forerunner to the Jem'Hadar that it had just not been right not to cover them. And I say this quite often when there's gaps in the Trek continuity, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a book or a comic or something that folds these species into the Jem'Hadar somehow.
The Jem'Hadar and the Vorta. You can see both of them in this episode, and I remember when this was first round, and the Hunters, and we never find out what the species is called. No. They're just called the Hunters. But they were in all the trailers and that, and you almost get the idea that they had these big ideas of where they wanted to go with DS9, but they weren't developed at this point. Yeah, and they sort of put some of the ideas out there, and then they thought, no, they're not the species that we want to be using eventually, but there's bits of what we've given these species that we want to take, and
there's definitely things in there that we see further down the line. So this one then, and this shows that we're early Deep Space Nine, before we've fully settled into where we're pitching the characters, because we have a Dabo girl complaining to Cisco about Quark effectively sexually harassing her. And maybe it's
she'd signed up for it.
Yeah.
I have no sympathy for her. She had a contract and she didn't read it. She was making a contract with a Ferengi.
That's certainly one take on it. And I think this is one of the ones where we see how society has changed a bit, because even though Sisko's not happy about this and he's saying there's no way you're going to have to honour it, it's still almost played off as, oh, that's Quark. And I don't think you'd do that joke now. I don't think you would have a main character who you can hand wave away this. But
well, the thing is though that it's showing them as it's showing that the Ferengi was still a lot of development to do. Like we'd seen them in TNG, and DS9's Ferengi move completely away from that.
Oh yeah, and this is very early days.
Yeah, but they have been established as like it's predominantly a male society, and we still see throughout DS9 that the women are lower. They're not allowed to join in business. They're not allowed to wear clothes, and the Ferengi do see women as a lower.
Yeah, they definitely
species,
do.
And this is setting all that up for the future.
Yeah, but I think what I'm getting at is the difference is that Quark is still a character that we're meant to sympathise with and we're meant to like and we're meant to enjoy. And I think this is a bit much seen from 2021 eyes. I don't think we'd have quite gone there. And I don't think they'd have done it with Quark later in the series either. But what I do, I like Sisko's line where he gets cut off. And it's one of them where you're like, I'd love to know what the end of that line were going to be. Because it says, I will make sure that he doesn't hold you to this provision concerning the exchange of... And then bodily
well,
fluid.
it's sexual favours, isn't it? It's sexual favours, and it's established. I'm sure it's established later on that it's actually a standard part of a Ferengi of a contract that a Ferengi would hand out. It isn't like Quark's been sleazy. Quark is just been Ferengi.
Yeah, he is just being Ferengi, but I just wonder what the exact wording was going to be. Like, would it have been exchange of sexual favours or exchange of bodily fluids, or what was?
Well, I always thought it was sexual favours.
But yeah, luckily Sisko doesn't get to finish the line, so we never find out. And yeah, we get the ship coming through the wormhole then, and we get Tosk, who looks very lizardy. He looks very stressed out at this stage, and they decide that O'Brien's going to go meet him. And I think this is indicative as well of the early days of DS9, that they were just getting a sense to who the actors were, who the characters were, what their strengths were. And they've realised that O'Brien's a good one as your everyman character. He's a good one as your relatable character. And you can tell this is very O'Brien because you get 2 O'Brien episodes back to back at this stage. So they were obviously comfortable writing for O'Brien, maybe because he'd had all the background so the writers knew him better.
Well, probably a lot to do with it. Like, it wasn't... as Q says in the next episode after this one, you were one of the little people.
Yes.
But we did see quite a lot of O'Brien.
Oh, we did, yeah. And O'Brien then, he goes to Tosk's ship, and Tosk's ship looks suspiciously like a Vulcan scout ship, but with a bit of a different paint job. So maybe there's a thing.
You're not saying that they'd kick bash, are you?
Not at all, and I won't be saying that later on either when we get to the Hunter's ship. But we'll talk about that when we get there. And then, so we've had the first similarity to the Jem'Hadar is the lizard-like appearance. Then we get that Tosca's got some sort of personal cloaking device, which
he's turned himself invisible.
Yeah, that's another Jem'Hadar thing. And O'Brien, this is a weird line, where he says, "Oh, well, You know, you get all sorts of weird things on ships. Maybe even people who can make themselves invisible. Hey, either he knew that Tosk had done that, or he's just it's a stab in the
yeah, because
very
his message back to Opson gone, have you beamed him out because there's no one here? And they say, no, his life signs are definitely still there.
So, yeah, okay, so maybe he's actually...
So O'Brien is aware that he's there, he just can't see him. So
right,
I think O'Brien's making that comment is quite reasonable. And he's just trying to make Tusk feel comfortable about him being there. Like, sort of, O'Brien's aware that he's made himself invisible. Obviously, he's wary of O'Brien.
But it's not
O'Brien knows he's there, but he's just going to keep trying to fix his ship.
Maybe, yeah. And I like the way O'Brien, like, he's constantly calling him friend, and he's trying to put him at ease, and he's trying to bond with him over, tell me about your ship, and what's this bit, and everything. And
so
then
I can fix it.
Yeah, and you get sort of a bit of a contrast with Tosk, who all of his language shows what kind of species he is really, because he goes to like the military side of it. He's like, what's this station for? Is it defense? Is it surveillance? And it's showing that he thinks in those terms. He thinks in terms of conflict. And we also find out he only needs 17 minutes of sleep a day, which is pretty good. Mine, he says per rotation. We don't know how short their rotations are. It might,
well, I think we generally look at rotations in the 20s to 30 hours. Yeah. We don't like it could live on a planet that's like Venus that does one rotation a year. Mm-hmm. And if it broke down into 24 hours and all that, and he has 17 minutes in, it could be actually he sleeps for weeks and weeks when it's all calculated out the difference.
Yeah, and you get this bit here where I remember what you're saying about how they bigged up like these were making it look like these were going to be the baddies, where Tosk says, show me where the weapons are kept. I remember that being in the trailers all the time for this episode.
Yeah. There was definitely how the trailers when DS9 first started, and I've still got my video of Emissary, the special edition when it first came out, and it has a big trailer for stuff. And there was lots from this episode in it.
Oh, I remember them trailers that were on the VHSs. They were great. I hope they've put them somewhere. I know you've got your copy, but yeah, I hope they're on YouTube or something. They were great fun. Or as special.
I've still got a video player.
Whatever. I know you have, yeah.
Maybe I should convert them and put them up on YouTube. There might be people want to see some of
trailers.
If people want to see some of the old trailers from DS9 videos, say, because I've got all of them and I'm quite happy to upload a few on YouTube till I get in trouble for it.
I like the one that they had. I think it was just before DS9 came out, and it was this big montage one for like all of Star Trek, and it had like scenes that were intercut from different things. Like it has a bit where it goes, and then it went further into the future with the next generation, and it has a clip of Kirk going, I guess we weren't sufficiently entertaining. And there's bits where they almost have like them sort of talking to each other, like Kirk will say something, they'll have a scene of Picard going, agreed. Yeah, they were great.
The thing is, when on VHS, you did actually used to watch the trailers because it was too much hassle, fast-forwarding and all that.
The fast forward didn't actually really fast forward it. You were just watching it with no sound.
In sped up terms.
Yeah, very weird. So O'Brien knows Tosk is hiding something. He talks to Sisko about it, but they carry on fixing his ship. And there's a good bit where like Tosk's obviously really eager to get going. But O'Brien's like, well, I can't send you out like this because I'll get a bad reputation. I'll bloody work on the other side.
The thing is that O'Brien probably is worried about is probably genuine there that he is worried about getting a bad reputation.
That's the thing you get. O'Brien's probably got half an eye on like, oh well, I could go work for someone in Gamma Quadrant, not right down to Starfleet.
But this does come back, doesn't it? In much later episodes, and it's commented on. Don't ever underestimate Starfleet engineers.
Oh, definitely, yeah, and especially
and the Kardashians say it, and I think the Vortas say it, and it is well known. Don't underestimate Starfleet engineers.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, there's no Star Trek series where they wouldn't have all been dead within a couple of episodes if it hadn't been for the engineer. They are the one who hold it all together. Absolutely. Then Tosk says, like, I live the greatest adventure when they're talking about, like, rest and relaxation. And we don't find out what he means yet. But there's a really good scene in Ops where they're all sort of spitballing ideas, blah, blah, blah. And I think you get a really, really early hint of where the relationship between Bashir and O'Brien's going to go. Because Bashir says, like, oh, well, why don't you bring him down to sickbay? And O'Brien just cuts him off and carries on talking to Cisco. Like, he won't even entertain Bashir talking. And Bashir looks a little bit out by it.
You do have this, don't you, that for a long time O'Brien didn't want to know Bashir.
No, he didn't.
But Bashir was determined that they'd be friends.
Yeah, and we'll see a lot of it during the Dominion arc, but I do think the relationship between Bashir and O'Brien is one of the best ever on TV. One of the
best ever built up over time.
The arc it goes through, and just the representation of a male friendship, which I think is something we don't see that often on TV, particularly in this era.
Even now, I don't think you see sort of male friendship and male bonding.
No,
portrayed properly. Like
usually,
it's either got to be gay relationships now, and like I have nothing against that, but like I watch the CW. I like the Arrowverse, but it's almost everyone now, and it's getting too overkill. If you know what I mean, that you need some of these heterosexual relationships and normal buddy bonding and
you don't. It's true. You don't see. You either usually get, if they're going to establish two male characters as friends, you either start the show with, hey, these guys are best friends, or they hate each other, or whatever. It's rare you see this develop the way they do with these two.
Yeah.
Which is great. We also get one of Odo's shapeshifts in this episode, which, to say that was, because that was another thing they really bigged up in the trailers for DS9, was look at the shapeshifting guy. And he does this, he does that, but you don't actually see
if you think
often.
It was a massively expensive effect for TV.
Oh, yeah.
Like we'd have, I'm trying to think how long after Terminator 2 this would be, where we had the shape-shifting
not
Terminator. But that had been like major movie budgets, and you didn't. And to do something like that on TV at the time this was made was bloody hell. And it was serious money.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But you can see that a lot with DS9, that you'll have episodes where there'll be loads of effects and all sorts going on. But then you'll have probably 3-4 episodes with no real effect work at all.
Yeah.
Just character stories, and it was literally how they had to spread the budget out to do the effects.
And with Odo, I think, as well, they wanted to do it more in the early days so that you could get used to the character as he's a shapeshifter, he can do this. But then as the character's more and more developed, you don't need to show it as much. the gimmick isn't necessary kind of thing. But we do get him pretending to be a painting at this point. And Tosk is wanting to die with honour, he says to O'Brien at this point, and that's when the Hunters turn up. And the Hunters ship looks...
Well, before they turn up, we have O'Brien taking Tosk around the station. And I think it's quite interesting when he goes and meets Quark.
Oh, yeah.
And O'Brien insists on calling him Barkeep.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And you've got Quark getting upset. I'm not a barkeep, I'm your host.
Yes. Yeah, it's some great...
But then Tusk apologises to Quark for not having any vices that he can exploit.
Yes. Yeah, very good. And the Hunter's ship then looks suspiciously like the ship from the TNG episode Haven, but without the big swirly dome thing on it. That's what I think it looks like. And yeah, the Hunters turn up. Again, very Jem'Hadar-y. The guns kind of look like Jem'Hadar guns. And
they go straight through Federation shields and knock the shield out straight away.
Yeah, exactly. And facially, they're not a million miles away. It's not bang on, but if you cross Tosk with a Hunter, you'd pretty much have a Jem'Hadar. Throw in a couple of lights as well, but...
Now, I wouldn't... there's a line in this, and, O'Brien's Irish, so he's a British actor, so he'll have grown up watching Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And, when the Hunters fire at the station and the shields go down, O'Brien goes, oh, they've reversed the polarity. Oh, and I wonder if it's that, because it's well known at the time of TNG, DS9 and that, with the script writers and that, they just put lines like techno-babble.
Yeah.
That they had to come up with something, and I wonder if O'Brien's just seen it and just said something because it's what he's grown up with. Because I just thought straight away that's John Pertwee. And O'Brien had been the right age to have grown up with John Pertwee.
I mean, for anyone who's not familiar with the John Pertwee era, if you imagine everything that the Doctor does now with a sonic screwdriver, instead of that, it was reverse the polarity.
Yeah.
That would
and it reversed the polarity of everything.
Everything, yeah. So, yeah, it could well be. It could be the writers just dropping a little bit in then. But yeah, it's very carefully shown.
It's a nice little Easter egg.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the bit with Odo during this sequence where he has a matter of pride. He's like, I'm not letting someone get taken from my brig.
Yeah.
Even if he's guilty or whatever, if he's my prisoner, I'm responsible.
He's my prisoner.
Yeah, and I really like that. That plays into how Odo is later on. And then ultimately, they've got their kind of like the Predator, where it changes its viewing modes. They've got an invisible seer thing that they can use.
Yeah, so, it's got a scanner so they can detect them being invisible, which sort of well, if you're hunting them, and one of the defences is they can turn invisible, but you can see them when they're invisible, well, what's the point of them turning invisible?
Maybe it's the thing that maybe the Tosks developed it, and then the Hunters developed the technology as a response to it. I don't know, because we don't know what the rules of this hunt are, or we know it's been going on a long time. So maybe it is a thing that the Tosk developed it as a survival mechanism. I don't know. I like that the hunt.
Really... I don't think that, because you do have when Sisko's talking to the head hunter, the chief hunter, and he says that, and he goes, well, we used to have blood spots and we'd hunt lower species, but we wouldn't hunt anything sentient. Yeah. And the hunter goes, yes, but we bred them that way. We created them for this. Yeah. And to me, that's just that's the Jem'Hadar, the Vorta,
Yeah.
And the founders and all this genetic breeding to be something.
Yeah, they've been created for a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
So
Hunters,
they've obviously created them with the ability to shield.
yeah, I think you're probably right. So the Hunter's really disgusted that Tosk's been captured, and they talk about the crew talks about what can they do? Can they offer him asylum? And ultimately, he refuses it because he wants to die with honor, like he said earlier on. And
Yeah. Cisco says that he'd have to ask for it.
yeah,
I
that's
can't just give him it. He has to request asylum.
Yeah, and then you get this great follow up with Quark now and O'Brien, where he goes there, and Quark's trying to give his barkeeperly advice, and O'Brien's saying, I don't want it, but it's Quark saying, oh, actually, O'Brien talks himself into it. Quark doesn't actually do it. O'Brien just says, oh, suppose you just change the rules. That's it, change the rules.
The rules.
Thanks, Sparky. And I love that bit where Quark goes up to the other guy. He's really happy with himself, and he sort of puffs his chest up. They're like, what's bothering you today? Really so proud of himself.
But Quark, and this is shown all the way through DS9. Quark had that opinion of himself that he could solve any problem. That he was the he was the goodie in Quark's eyes. He was the main goodie in DS9.
Yeah, and he often does solve problems, so he's not always wrong. So O'Brien sabotages the security scanners, and this is, you were talking about how they do effects, then they save money. So this sequence of O'Brien disabling these security scanners in sequence, I think they use this 2 or 3 more times just this season in different episodes. But yeah, so he's done that, so Tosk can escape. Oh, and then there's the bit where Odo says, well, I better get down, and Cisco, hang on, no hurry. So
no hurry.
And then Rene Auberjonois does that brilliant thing where he just walks the slowest you've ever seen anybody walk. And he turns around really slowly into the turbo lift and everything.
Well, this has always got me. Like, we know turbo lifts move really fast around places. But look how slow that lift always moves from odds.
As it goes,
and it has nothing properly and it has nothing properly to seal you in.
No, it's a weird. That turbo lift is weird. I mean,
I wonder if it's like that, and then it moves down into a tube,
maybe.
like it goes into a capsule, and then it can fire off really fast. But
see, I'm not sure because I think in the first episode with Loxana, where Odo and Loxana are caught in it, I think you see a view of the inside of it, and it is just the wall.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. It's a while since I've watched that one.
It's really weird from safety point of view, if it's going really fast around the station.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And you could just put your hand on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. Be up there. It'd be like thingy, wouldn't it? Total Recall, like, see you at the party, Richter. His arms off. Yeah. So I just remember the line that the lead hunter says, where they're saying, you know, you're not going to take him, blah, blah, blah. And he's really shocked. He's like, over this Tosk? And I think it's a great, like, the way he delivers it is brilliant. But it's like you were saying, it ties into the fact that they don't see the Tosk as anything more than an animal. I mean, even, you know, obviously we're not going to get into the politics of hunting animals for sport and things like that, you know, and I don't agree with it myself.
Yeah, but they've created, like, they've basically, like they said, they've genetically created them, so they create this species purely to hunt. And
so it's inconceivable to them that they could have any other rights other than that. And I find that interesting, but it don't do him any good anyway, because Tosk takes out the lead hunter anyway. And he gets away. He says, "Die with honor" to O'Brien, so they sort of part as friends. And
well, it tells O'Brien that he is now Tusk.
no, he does. Yeah, that's great. See, why didn't they do a follow-up where the hunters are after O'Brien or something? You know, that'd have been interesting.
Just to see this species again, and it's obvious, and this is why I think it's so obvious that they had ideas of where they wanted to go with the Gamma Quadrant, and they had ideas what they wanted to do with the species, and they did this episode, and there's a lot of things that you can see that are taken forward, but they decided these were the actual species that they wanted for 7 seasons.
Yeah. And there's a great ending scene with Sisko and O'Brien basically admits it, but then Sisko in turn pretty much admits to O'Brien that, we let you get away with it. So
yeah, but I think that's a very Sisko thing, isn't it? And it's something that we've seen with other captains as well, where they know what the crew members doing is wrong, but they agree, and they've got to sanction them or reprimand them for it at the end, but they agree with what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, he's one of them, and Sisko does do it a lot. Sisko does a lot of bollocking his crew, much more so, I think, than any other captain. Which means, like, season 4, when Worf comes into it, every other episode seems to finish with Sisko bollocking Worf and teaching him how to be a better commander. We'll get on to those in due time. So, just before we wrap up the episode then, this is my headcanon for where these guys fit in with the Jem'Hadar. I think these are an offshoot of the Jem'Hadar that have developed their own society. And because the Jem'Hadar are bred for war, that's why they've developed this game and this things like that.
Almost like there may be an early experiment of the founders. They hadn't quite got it. They hadn't quite got the genetics where they wanted to.
Yeah, an earlier version. Just cut them off and let them go off and form their own society. And something like that, because there's too many similarities for there not to be something. And Star Trek fans, we like to invent our own headcanon and fill in the blanks and everything.
We often have to invent our own headcanon.
That's very true as well. So that's my take on it anyway. So
I'm happy with that.
So I think this is a good early episode of Deep Space Nine. There's some in season 1, but this is a good one.
And I think we've explained ourselves why we've included this in a Dominion War arc. And I know that other Dominion War arcs people have done don't go this far back, but I think it's worth you have to look at some of the other Gamma Quadrant species.
Yeah, you do. And, don't worry. We're not going to do Move Along Home because they're definitely not connected to the Dominion War. We might do that in other circumstances. Probably we'll do that.
Yeah, we're missing that one out.
During the same drinking session.
I think there's an interesting part, like, right at the start of this episode, when Tusk first comes through the wormhole, immediately Sisko puts the station on yellow alert.
Yeah.
So even that early, they're worried about anything coming through the wormhole.
Oh yeah, which you'd have to be, wouldn't you? So at this stage, we haven't got a clue what's in the Gamma Quadrant. We're not.
And we're just letting ships go through there, explore, go do what you want.
Yeah, it's maybe that'll come back to bite them as we might find out.
It's like O'Brien says to Tusk. There's 6 or 7 ships a week going through.
Yeah, it's weird that there's 6 or 7 ships, but at this point in the series, apart from the very first time in the very first episode, we haven't. The crew hasn't gone back through. I think very briefly they go into the wormhole in the second or third episode past prologue, but that's because somebody's nicked a runabout. But I don't think we go back to the Gamma Quadrant for a couple of episodes yet. So, yeah.
No, it's a funny one because with the wormhole, because it was like, I know how important it does become later on, but there was a big deal about it in the emissary and all that. And then we forget about it for quite a way into season 1 when you look back at it.
Yeah, we don't do a lot.
Obviously, they were developing the characters, etc. But there's a lot of episodes just built just on the station.
It does make you wonder in some instances whether the scripts were scripts that had been hashed out for TNG, and they'd gone, we can do a rewrite on that and make it into a DS9, so they don't feature.
Yeah, I think, and it's that thing that you come back to you've always got to come back to with Star Trek and other TV shows from the time was budgets.
Oh yeah,
that like Emissary was done on the budget they used was like making a small movie. It was massive for the time it was made. So you do have umpteen episodes where they're probably, you can't go into space or to another planet for a few weeks. I mean, we've done that.
They've spent a fortune on the set of Deep Space Nine. I mean, just the set of the Promenade is huge.
Oh, it's huge.
Bigger than any set on TNG. But anyway, so that about wraps us up for these ones. But we'll be back next time. We haven't decided what we're going to do. So next time is our 100th episode. So I haven't quite decided. We'll have to do something special.
I think we should do something special for our 100th anniversary.
We'll work something out. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us, we're on Twitter at RetrekPod. You can email us retrekpod@gmail.com. Come and join us on Facebook. Just search for Retrek. You can check out Elliot's videos of his TOS Enterprise that he's building on the YouTube channel. Or you can
test videos of Voyager's phasers.
Yeah, exactly. Cracking on with it now. And
I'm doing some clever things with LEDs.
But thanks for trekking with us this time, and we'll see you next time on the Retrek.
Thank you. Bye-bye.